be able to get this passed in 2026. She's not going to be able to get it passed in 2027. She's not going to be able to get it passed in 2028. But in 2029, there's going to be a new administration. And it is likely, I think, at this point, that that administration is going to be a Democrat administration. And there's a strong chance that they have both, or they have the Congress and the presidency. It's not guaranteed, but I think there's a strong chance. And if that is what actually ends up happening, then the the chances of something like this passing are pretty high. Just like when the Republicans had the presidency and the Congress, they were able to get through Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and the One Big Beautiful Bill. So similar kind of thing can happen on the Democrat side. And I think Elizabeth Warren is one of the ranking Democrats, and so she would be able to get something like this done. Now, it is blatantly unconstitutional as well. So if you look at the 16th Amendment, um, in fact, let's go to 16th Amendment. See if we can find the actual text here. But it's very basic. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. That's the whole amendment. And so that is pretty cut and dried. And so a wealth tax is not a tax on income; it's a tax on wealth, and therefore it is unconstitutional. They will make the argument, though, that because people are tapping these asset values for loan purposes, which they do, that it forms a kind of phantom income. I mean, maybe. Uh, you can make those arguments if you want, but I think it would fail in the courts. But it is just an indication that whatever you give them will never be enough, right? So right now, the proposal is net worth tax on people making $50 million, or people with net worth of $50 million or more. Now, in California, they're proposing their own 5% wealth tax. In Washington, they just passed a millionaire's tax on people making over $1 million in income, 9.9%, which is also unconstitutional under the Washington state constitution, and is already facing legal challenges. But these people will pass these laws and try to enforce them. Whether they're successful or not is kind of a different question. But the fundamental drive is that it's never enough, right? So Americans paid $4.5 trillion in taxes in the previous year, and what can't you do with $4.5 trillion? Well, you can't spend $7 trillion like they have been, right? That's, at least it's harder. And what Americans have proved over kind of the COVID era was that the 10% inflation is unacceptable to Americans, because we had 10% inflation, and not all, but the president was voted out, and the Congress was shifted from Democrat to Republican. So the old expression of "vote the bums out" kind of works sometimes, and it is sufficient motivation for politicians, because remember, the whole job of a politician is to spend tax money in order to get reelected, right? So it's spending your money that you gave them in taxes, and there is no limit to that incentive, right? So if they could get away with it, they would spend 5 trillion more, or 6 trillion more, or 7 trillion more, as much as they can get away with. And what Americans proved in the last cycle was that there's a limit to how much they can get away with. Uh, Somebody's on the chat. Sorquare, waving. How's it going? Good to see you there. So, this proposal from Warren is just the latest in an unending stream of these things. So, if you go back to the original income tax, when the 16th Amendment was passed, which is not the original income tax, that was Civil War, but the passage of the income tax system that we have now, it was the same thing. It was saying, hey, you people of the states, because a constitutional amendment has to be ratified. You people of the states should support this, because it's not going to apply to you. We're just going after the rich guys. And at that time, a rich person was somebody making $3,000 a year. Now here we are, 113 years later, and the that level has been eroded through inflation, where anybody making $3,000 a year is in abject poverty, right? So, it's always the same sales pitch, and you have to know that these are sales pitches, and they're always lies. So when the government says, "Oh, we're just going to tax these people. You should support this initiative because it's not going to apply to you. It's only going to affect those rich guys." Just know that it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time before it affects you. And maybe if you are, whatever stage in life you are, and you die before that threshold reaches you, okay, maybe that works out for you. But it's going to affect, the generalized you eventually, regardless. As soon as you let them get a foot in the door, they're going to take, they're going to go all the way in, as quickly as they can. And how quickly that is depends on, political conditions and things. But, you know, so Americans spend more in taxes than anybody in the history of the world, and um, it's never enough. So, like I said, it's not going to pass this year. But in 2029, strong possibility. I would give it 50% chance of it passing in 2029. And you might say, "Oh, it doesn't affect me because I'm not one of these people." But it's just a matter of time. So be very, very careful with support of these types of things. So that's Elizabeth Warren, and she introduces similar kinds of bills all the time. And this one says that they're going to raise $6.2 trillion, right? And the way they quote these things is like in 10-year intervals, right? So if it's $6.2 trillion, they mean over the 10 years after such a bill would be passed, it's gonna create that much revenue for the government. Uh, and you know, in the history of government projections, there's not a single one that has been right, and that's right, left, whatever. None of them are correct. So you can always bet that people will respond. People do change behavior in response to incentives, and the uh, whatever they think they will get it'll be less than what they project. So they'll introduce more distortions into the economy, more distortions into people's behavior away from whatever they would have done voluntarily, and that is that is just par for the course. And so if you're an Austrian economics proponent or adherent or believer, then these are what create malinvestments. So it is a malinvestment in the sense that it is creating a directed behavior that pushes away from what people would do under their natural inclinations, and it just creates more problems. So it'll never be enough. And the way I view things, I was actually concerned for like 2 weeks during the start of the Doge initiative, because my whole thesis is that the incentives are such that the government will always tax more and spend more. And the only way to restrain the evils that they do in the world, and I realize not everybody agrees with that framing, but that's where I come from. And the only way to restrain the evils that they do in the world are to prevent them from getting money in the first place, because they will spend more, but there's a limit, and we found the limit is about 10%. So the tax strategy that I help my clients with is, I mean, keep your money, great, enjoy the fruits of your labor, but also, we are achieving a larger objective here, in that by keeping that money in your pocket through, following the rules that are in place, but, following the rules in an advantageous kind of way, that is what allows for the limitation of spending. Because whatever money you give them, they're going to spend. You can't rely on them to restrain themselves, right? And I think the Doge whole project really, really proved this. And like I said, for about 2 weeks, I was like, am I wrong? And then, because they're announcing, they're cutting this contract, cutting that contract, they're cutting down on fraud and abuse and all these kinds of things. And then we saw Congress turn around, and they just passed the same and larger spending anyways. So, it's like, oh no, I'm not wrong. It's just there was this one group that was trying to change things a little bit, and that did not pass muster, because if you cut a contract but you still spend the same amount, it's like, what are we doing here? And the answer is nothing. So Doge was a failure. Um, I wish that weren't so, but is what it is. So so Yeah, it's never going to be enough for them. Um, and the only defense that we have is to not give them the money in the first place, and that's where the tax strategy comes in. So, recognize the realities. Because I have people coming to me, it's like, well, did you know that, the laws of the United States only apply to Washington, D.C.? I was like, okay, buddy. Or other people will say that the 16th Amendment was not ratified properly. Um, and there's all these different arguments about why the whole tax system is illegitimate. And, maybe, I don't know. I do know that it's been enforced for the last 113 years, and they have the guns on the jails. So, do with that what you will. My approach to it is whether your interpretation is correct or not. This is the system we live in, and so we use the rules that exist, and we will do our best to keep as much away from them as possible. And you can do a lot, fundamentally. I did a tax return yesterday for a client, and we're saving him $30,000, and that's not insignificant because most people, when you average it all out between federal income taxes, state income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, your tax load on average is about 40%, which is crazy. So you're spending 40% of the year working, doing whatever it is you do on behalf of, these various governments. It might be the city government, it might be the county government, it might be the state government, it might be the federal government. But, the system is the same set of incentives regardless of what level you're at. I mean, obviously the amount of damage they can do is different, but the behavior is the same. So, um, that's where I come from on all this stuff, and I'm trying to do my best to obviously help my clients and save them. You know, if we take their tax rate from 40% down to 15%, let's say, that's 25% of a year. That's 3 months of your life every year that you're getting back for your own productive purposes, for your own family, for your own community, whatever it is you want to do with your time and your energy and your money. You have that for yourself to make your own decisions, and so that's just how I view things. And Elizabeth Warren is always good for the counterexample because she's just a nut job. But people in Massachusetts keep electing her, so it is what it is. Um, so that was the first story I wanted to go over, and I'm trying to keep these coffee breaks short, so it's like a half hour. So I'll spend a couple minutes on this other story here. Let's see. How do I share? I swear I will learn how to use the software. I promise. Share screen. Complexity. Yeah. Okay. So this was a story that came out yesterday. I think it was, or no, 5 hours ago. So back in March of 2025, Trump signed an executive order, and it was Executive Order 14247. And what it said was they were modernizing, quote unquote, the America's checkbook, I think is what it said. And basically, they were saying we don't want to receive checks for payments, and we don't want to send checks for payments. And the executive branch should, all the executive administrations, of which the IRS is one, um, should implement systems to phase out paper checks. And so this report just came out saying that the number of taxpayers facing delayed tax refunds has ballooned to 1.4 million, up from 830,000 just weeks earlier. And so that is the that's the headline, right? That's the takeaway. So a year ago, Trump said we don't want checks, we're not going to pay checks. People expecting checks for refunds now are getting notices from the IRS saying, "Hey, we need your direct deposit information. We're not going to send you a check." And how legal that is, debatable. Um, like everything, every executive order, Trump signs he gets sued over in various courts. But so far, this one is surviving. And so, when I talk to clients, a number of clients, especially older clients, retirees, are not comfortable with anybody depositing stuff into their bank account or sending things electronically. I've got people who will mail me a check from Michigan or wherever, rather than just pay, an online invoice. And so, uh, it's just is what it is, and that's how people want to interact with the financial system. But they're facing challenges in that the government is apparently holding up their refunds, and so I've been telling people as it's come up, especially with estimated tax payments and annual tax payments. I said, there was this executive order. Trump signed it last year, but I'll tell clients that, hey, just so you know, if you send them a check, they will cash it. They have so far. Nobody's gotten a return check from the IRS and say, oh, we don't want it like this. We want payment from this other system. So that has not happened. But the reverse has happened, where they are due a check and they're not getting them. So if you are claiming a refund, they are enforcing this, where they do want direct deposit. Now there are drawbacks to this. If you authorize direct deposit, then they could come in and take money. This actually happened in Georgia back in 2008, I think it was. Like the first batch of refunds that were processed incorrectly. People got too much money, and the people who had and it wasn't that many, but it made the news. The people who had gotten direct deposit, the state went in and clawed the money back, and they said, well, once you give a direct deposit authorization, those people have access and they can make reversing transactions. Um, and so those people, the money was just taken. And the people who got checks from the state that year, who were in that batch, well, they got a letter, but the government couldn't go in and then just take the money. So, there are security risks to consider if you are doing direct deposits, and uh, you know, the supposedly, the IRS protects all your data, but there have been hacks and leaks and everything before. There will be again. There was a big hack, or not that the hack was new, but the release was new. I think it was 2 years ago. The thing that was interesting about it is that these data packages are sold on the dark web amongst hackers and criminal organizations, and then this one was just put online for anybody to download. And so who knows how many people downloaded it. Somebody set up a website where you could check your own information, and so I checked myself, and sure enough, my info was in there. It was at the address that was associated with my name was my parents' address, which I haven't lived at since 1997. But my information was in there, and so I know for sure my social security number has been leaked. Uh, will anybody do anything with it? Well, no, because I have a credit monitoring service. But that's not the only thing that can happen. I had one client a couple of years ago. Her social security number was stolen by somebody in Colorado for the purposes of enrolling in Obamacare. And so she got this letter from the healthcare.gov people. She called me up. She's, what is this? And we figured out that's what happened. So we filed an identity theft affidavit with the IRS and opted into the identity protection PIN program. And nothing has shown up since. But these things can and do happen. So the people who are reluctant to engage in direct deposit or direct debit, I understand. But so far they are forcing the issue, at least on the refund side. But like I said, if you write them a check, they will cash it. I've never seen a return check from the IRS. All right, so those are the two stories that I wanted to go over today on this coffee break. Although I will be honest, I never developed a taste for coffee, so I drink tea. Um, but hopefully that's been a little bit helpful for people. And we do these every week, Fridays at noon Eastern. Although I was challenged on Wednesday to do these daily, which might be coming, but we'll see. All right. Hope everybody has a good weekend. Whether you're celebrating holidays this weekend or not, let's get out there and keep our own money, fundamentally. All right. Catch you guys later.